Blocked my absent dad after he resurfaced demanding a relationship, and now my mom thinks I should forgive him. My mom and dad married young and had 6 ladder step kids. The longest gap in ages between us is 27 months. My dad found a job that paid well, but he would be home for 2 weeks every 3 months or so. When he was home, he'd show some interest in us, but most times he'd be sleeping or watching TV. One night when he was gone for work and we were with our aunt since my mom had to work, the whole neighborhood broke into our house and completely destroyed and stole everything. When my mom took the cops to our neighbor's house, she pointed out every house that helped and said what they took because she wouldn't be the only one in trouble. After that, we went to our aunt's and my mom called my dad, told him what happened and asked him repeatedly to come home. He chose to stay at work. After that night we didn't see him for about a year and a half. When he did show up, it would be in sporadic intervals from 10 months to 2 years apart and only for a few minutes at a time, but always when my mom wasn't around. When I turned 14, he started coming around more often and started spending an hour or two with us every couple months. He took a special interest in us living with him and would make a point to say it every time he saw us. At 15 I moved in and everything went to downhill fast. He started mentally and verbally attacking my looks and my body. He'd talk about women often and how they should always submit no matter what. He would give me something only to take it back. He gave me an allowance but would be mad if I spent it. He got upset with me for not talking to him enough, but would give one-word responses when I tried to start a conversation. Then there was a situation where I found some pretty damning evidence of his mistreatment of my mom on his computer. I was a busy kid with little to no free time. I was in sports, after-school clubs, student council, theater and prom/homecoming committee. When homecoming came around I asked if I could go. He agreed and was reminded almost every week of when it was. The night of homecoming, when my date arrived to pick me up, he pulls me to the side and said I can't go because I had to help him pack and move out of our house. Completely blindsided because what? We did not discuss moving, and why would you wait until homecoming night to say something? We went back and forth for a little bit and I offered to come straight home afterwards instead of spending the night with my friends like I intended. He was annoyed but agreed. The dance was over at 9, I got home at 9:45. I was helping pack along with some cousins he invited over, but I guess I wasn't going fast enough. He started yelling and he ended up laying hands on me. I left immediately and called my aunt who came to get me. He started flooding my phone with texts and calls saying how ungrateful I am, how I cost him so much money, how bad of a person I am, etc. I didn't respond to any of it. After about 2 months, I started reaching out to him about my clothes and belongings, asking if we could talk, etc. He never responded and blocked my number. I went to his house a few months after that, but when he opened the door and saw it was me, he slammed the door in my face and started cussing at me through the door until I left. It has been almost 12 years since then. On to a few weeks ago, I get a text from a random number calling me by name. Me, who is this? Him, it's your dad. Me, what do you want? Him, I want to see about me being your dad and you being my daughter. A wave of confusion, disbelief and finally rage washed over me all at once. I responded that horse is dead. He waited a few minutes and replied, it's not dead, just on life support, but with some work, it can get better. I blocked him and called my mom. She said, that's still your dad. You need to let that hurt go and talk to him. Her response is what has me second guessing the way I handled this situation and has me thinking that maybe I was a little too harsh. Maybe trying to explore a relationship with him is something I should do. However, if this were a random person doing these things, it would be cut and dried and never speak to them again, so why should I give him another chance just because we are related? Why should I do the work on his terms when he wasn't willing to meet me or speak to me on mine? Why do I feel like the bad guy for making a stance for my own mental well-being? Why is it okay for him to mistreat everyone and only when he's ready is when it will be resolved? Should I listen to my mom instead and just talk to him anyway? Ida? Hello everyone, I wanted to start by thanking everyone who commented. I don't know how to do an edit, so I'm posting answering some questions and addressing some comments I feel need clarification. I will update in a separate post because this might get long, so apologies in advance. I'm long-winded, deal with it. Lol. 1. My mother, for all the people downing on my mother. Just know, find somewhere else to dump your trauma. My mother is a hard worker and giver and has been all her life. She graduated HS at 16, was a regional manager by 20, and purchased her first house in cash by 22. Needless to say, she was and still is, doing well for herself. She volunteers to feeding programs, clothes/shoe giveaways, she donates money to charity, buys strangers food and clothes, babysits kids of struggling parents, or helps them financially, take meals and clothes to senior citizens, even gives what she has right off her back. She has always been a giver and has a big heart for everyone. Even the people talking bad about her, she would still see that your needs are met. Sometimes a little kindness goes a long way. 2. The break-in, some people saying it's fake, I wish it was. We were terrified and I hope that never happens to anyone. Like I said, my mother was well off, but we lived in a not so well off neighborhood. The kids in the house behind us would steal our stuff often. They took our bikes, our balls, our swimming pool, our coats or clothes if we left them outside. Sometimes we'd get home and they'd be running out of our backyard because they were playing on our playset, which they eventually took too. When we would tell her, she'd say, just let them have it. If they had to steal it, they may not have a way to get it themselves. Then she'd go buy us another one, because she's always been forgiving to others. However, because of this, the neighborhood knew we had nice things in our house. The night of the break-in, that was the house she took the cops to. The mother of the kids is the one who told on 5 other houses. Surprise, surprise, they were all related. So, it was basically one big family, all living close to each other who did it. When we left to live with our aunt, they broke into our house 3 more times after that, I guess to get what they didn't take the last time. 3. The evidence on the computer, there were emails of him asking his cousins and siblings to lie for him, saying they saw him send my mom more money than he did, or how they witnessed my mom not letting him see us. There were court documents of their divorce proceedings, and a list of things he asked for, including a house my mom helped her sister purchase, and the house we were currently living in that she bought with her own money before they were together. Lastly, a bunch of recordings of my dad calling my mom on the phone, without her knowledge or consent, and basically provoking her repeatedly to try to get a reaction. During the calls, he brought us up many times and called her a terrible mother for keeping him away from us, among many other things I won't repeat. She reminded him, he chose to leave us and that wasn't on her. She never kept us from him. He's a grown man and it's not her responsibility to make sure he maintains a relationship with his own children. There was a bunch of back and forth, but I guess she never gave him the reaction he was looking for because they all ended the same. He always got mad and ended up yelling, to which she said, "If you can't be an adult and talk, I'm hanging up." While most of these were sort of old, there were a few that were recent at the time, like really recent. The last recording I listened to was 2 weeks after I moved in. He told her that he finally got me to move in with him because I told him I hated her since she's a bad mom. That was the one that broke her. She started crying and basically told him, he can say whatever he wanted to say, but that wouldn't change anything. She would be praying for him to find peace in his soul so he won't have to put others down just to feel powerful. To this he laughed, told her she's being emotional, then said whatever. Here we go with your fake tears. Are you done? And hung up laughing. I was disgusted and above all, pissed. This whole time he's been telling me how much he missed us, how it's not his fault he doesn't see us more often, and how he's always wanted us. Reality hit me and turns out, it was just lies. I never told him she was a bad parent or that I hated her. He was absolutely using me just to get under her skin, using his own child like a pawn in his ultimate get-back game to hurt the mother of his kids after essentially trying to make us homeless in court. I realized, that's why he had been adamant about asking every time he saw us to move in, and why he always made it seem like a dream to live with him. He wanted his court case to be stronger so he could legally steal from her. He coerced and manipulated me, and like a dummy, I fell for it, and I started to hate him for it. Towards the end of our relationship, I absolutely became distant, stopped talking to him unless I had to, and barely ate. I was a busy kid because I didn't want to be home. I figured if I drowned myself in sports, after school programs or volunteer work, it would be less time I'd have to be around him, so that's what I did. 4. The conversation with my mom. Of course, the conversation was a lot longer than the 4 words I shared on my post, and her comment I shared was not the end of the conversation. We talked for about an hour and a half about it. At first, she was listening, asking a question every now and again, and overall letting me vent. She made the comment I shared, and when I voiced the same concerns I voiced on here, she heard me out. She said I should forgive him, not for him, but for me, because she doesn't want me holding on to hate in my heart, and not to have regrets about not pursuing a relationship if he were to pass away. She never pressured me or made me think that was the only option I had. At the end of the conversation, she said it was my decision and she'd support me in whatever choice I made. She is the furthest from a doormat, an enabler, or weak like some of you said. She is the strongest person I know, because WHO among you can look at someone who did all that, but still forgive them? Update 1. A few days after I blocked my dad, my siblings randomly started asking about him and if I had spoken to or wanted to hang out with him. This was weird for several reasons, since 1. We never talk about him at all, and 2. They knew from past conversations I don't want to have a relationship with him. So if they do talk about him, it's never with me. At first I was brushing it off, but after a few times, I started inquiring why they kept asking. They'd either changed the subject or made an excuse like, no reason, or I was just curious. About 3 weeks ago, I was talking to my older brother, and he mentioned having to run an errand. I offered to go with him. He hesitated, changed the subject and tried to leave. I asked what he was going to do since I had stuff to do also. That's when he said to fix a truck. He said he won't be long, so I asked whose truck he was going to go look at and if he needed my help again. That's when he finally said it was our dad's truck. Confused, I asked how long he'd been talking to our dad for him to feel comfortable to go help him fix his truck. Apparently, this isn't new news. My brother has been seeing and helping our dad for years. From that conversation, I found out all of my siblings had been talking to and meeting up with our dad. They'd go to his house, dinners, shopping, shows, etc. Side note, no, I haven't told my siblings about the things I found on his computer, or about the things he said to me while I was living with him. I don't think that will do anything but cause more confusion or strife. If they choose to be around him and he is being a dad to them, then great for them. Anyway, after I blocked him, I guess he asked them to ask me why I wouldn't speak with him. I was kind of upset with them because none of them had the decency to just be honest with me about their intentions and why they kept bringing it up, but I was more upset with our dad because why aren't you respecting my answer? I started to be a bit distant from my siblings because of this, and my oldest sister noticed. She came to me about a week ago and asked if I wanted to join them for a family dinner. I said no thanks, so she left it alone. A few days later, she asked again. My answer hadn't changed, so she said I should just try it. She assured me she'd sit beside me or in between us if my only option was to sit by our dad. She said I didn't have to talk to him if I didn't want to and could just talk to her, but she wanted me to be there too. Maybe because I wanted answers from him. Maybe to get her to leave me alone about it. Maybe just to see what I would feel like being around him after all this time. Maybe it was none of these, or all of them at once. I think I was just over the whole thing, so I agreed to go. And oh boy, did it go. So, 2 nights ago we all met up at a restaurant. When I pulled up, my dad was waiting outside the building. I sat in the car until the rest of my siblings got there and we all walked up together. When our dad saw me, he went to hug me, but I walked past him. He moved to the front of me as we were walking so he could hold the door open for me. I just gave an awkward side eye and walked in the door. When we were seated, I sat at the furthest end of the table away from him, and my sister sat beside me like she said she would. She touched my hand under the table and whispered, "Just breathe," to me. I hadn't realized how tense I was until she said that because I could physically feel my body relax then get really hot after I exhaled. At first, my dad tried to talk to me and ask questions about life, but I only gave 1 or 2 word responses or a head nod. Eventually, he started talking to the rest of my siblings. I spent the rest of the time mainly in silence, just pushing the food on my plate around. Towards the end of the meal, I excused myself to the restroom but left my bag and phone there. When I got back to the table, everyone was gone, and so was my stuff. I looked out the window and saw them walking towards the cars, so I went to head out to see who had my stuff. When I came to the front doors, my dad was waiting there blocking the doorway with my stuff in his hands. I looked at my stuff and then at him. He went to hug me again, but I took a step back. He started talking about how he wanted us to be a family and how he knows I'm mad at him right now, etc., but honestly, I just started to disassociate. In his whole speech, I never heard an apology. Just how my emotions were keeping me from opening back up to him like old times. After a while, I reached for my stuff again and that's when he grabbed me and hugged me. I wanted to push him off, but I'm barely over 5 foot and he's a lot taller and stronger than I am. He said, "You know I love you, right? Right? Right?" And wouldn't let go of me until I said sure. He kissed my forehead, handed me my stuff and left out the door. At this point, I'm just numb. I cried all the tears I could. I've screamed all the screams, grieved the childhood I'll never have and the future I can't see him in. Grieved all the memories only I have to share with myself. Like being the youngest MVP as a freshman on a team of seniors who went to states and won 3rd place. Like how I broke the school record 3 years in a row, or how whenever I was on stage during a play, I saw everyone's parent but my own. How I walked myself out on senior recognition night and waved to a crowd full of strangers alone. How I never got to go to a daddy/daughter anything, or how I could never call him up to talk about my day or boy trouble. How he won't be the one walking me down the aisle or be a part of my children's life if or when I have them. This night solidified to me the hunger I had for him to show that he actually wanted me was gone. The anticipation of him saying, "Baby, I messed up, how can we fix it together?" That never came. At the end of the day, he was still him. A smooth talker who only wants what he wants and nothing more. I've checked out with him, and I don't think I'll be opening up this door again. Sorry, this isn't the rainbows and sunshine ending some of you are expecting, but life doesn't always go to plan. I will continue to work on me and trying my best to be the example my mother set for me to forgive. However, I guess that brings me to the only question that's left unanswered. Can I truly and deeply forgive him and never want to see him again? At this point, I just feel indifference towards him. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update and honestly, I thought I'd be done with this whole situation. I thought I could just close that chapter of my life, focus on myself, and move forward. But life rarely follows the neat little plans we make for it. About a month ago, I got a call from my oldest sister. She was crying, which immediately put me on high alert because she's not one for emotional displays. Between her sobs, she managed to tell me that our dad was in the hospital. Apparently, he'd had a heart attack while at work and was in critical condition. My initial reaction? Nothing. I felt absolutely nothing. No panic, no sadness, no rush of forgiveness washing over me like in those Hallmark movies where a parent gets sick and suddenly all is forgiven. Just emptiness. "He's asking for you," she said after a moment of my silence. "The doctors say they're not sure if he's going to make it." I told her I'd think about it and hung up. I spent the next 3 days in a weird emotional limbo. Part of me kept thinking, this is it. This is the moment where you're supposed to rush to his bedside and have that dramatic reconciliation. But another part, the part that remembered him slamming the door in my face, the manipulative recordings, the way he grabbed me at that restaurant and demanded I say he loved me, that part was still very much alive and protective. I called my mom. Unlike last time, she didn't suggest forgiveness or remind me he was my father. Baby, she said gently, whatever you decide to do, make sure it's what you need, not what you think you should do or what others want. You have to live with your choice. After another day of wrestling with myself, I decided to go. Not for him, but for me. I needed to know that whatever happened, I wouldn't have regrets about my own actions. When I got to the hospital, all my siblings were there. They seemed surprised to see me but grateful. My oldest sister hugged me for so long I thought she might never let go. They'd been taking shifts staying with him, and apparently, he'd been asking for me every time he was lucid enough to speak. I waited until most of them had left for a coffee break before I went into his room. The man in the bed barely resembled the imposing figure who'd once terrified me. He was pale, hooked up to machines, looking small and frail. It was jarring. His eyes were closed when I walked in, and I almost turned around to leave, but then they fluttered open. For a moment, he just stared at me like he couldn't believe I was there. You came, he whispered, his voice raspy. I stood at the foot of his bed. Yeah. I didn't think you would. That makes two of us, I said. There was an awkward silence. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, wondering what I was even doing there. I messed up, he said finally. With you, with your mother. With everything. I didn't say anything. I'd heard similar half-admissions before. I was a terrible father to you, he continued, his voice breaking. I was selfish and cruel and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I know that now. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't what I expected. This wasn't the same man who'd cornered me at the restaurant, demanding love he hadn't earned. Why now? I asked. Why did it take this? I gestured to the hospital room, the machines keeping him alive, for you to say that. He closed his eyes for a moment. Because I'm a coward. Because it took staring death in the face to admit how wrong I've been. Because I've been too ashamed to face what I did to you. I pulled up a chair and sat down, still keeping my distance but no longer feeling like I needed to be ready to bolt out the door. I found those recordings, I said quietly. Years ago, the ones of you and Mom. I heard what you said about me. His face crumpled. I was trying to hurt her. I used you to do it. There's no excuse. We talked for almost 2 hours. He told me things I never knew, about his own father who'd been even worse to him, about the depression he'd never treated, about the regret that had been eating him alive for years. He apologized, not in the vague way people do when they want forgiveness without accountability, but specifically, for specific things he'd done. I cried. He cried. It wasn't a magical fix-everything moment, but it was. Something real. 3 days later, he stabilized enough to be moved out of ICU. A week after that, he was discharged with strict orders for lifestyle changes and medication. We've talked a few times since then. Short phone calls, mostly. I'm still cautious, still keeping firm boundaries. He seems to be respecting them so far. Last week, he asked if I would be willing to meet him for coffee, in a public place, just for half an hour. I said I would think about it. And I am thinking about it. Not because I owe him anything or because he's my dad. But because I'm wondering if there's a version of forgiveness that doesn't require me to pretend the past never happened, but rather acknowledges it fully while still allowing for something new to grow in its place. I don't know what that would look like yet. I don't know if it's even possible after everything. But for the first time in almost 12 years, I'm willing to find out. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm still trying to navigate this new, uncertain terrain with my dad. After much consideration, I did agree to meet him for coffee. That first meeting was awkward, to say the least. We sat across from each other, both clutching our cups like lifelines, struggling to find words that didn't feel loaded with decades of hurt. Since then, we've been meeting once a month. It's not always easy, and there are times when I leave feeling drained and questioning everything. But there are also moments, brief flashes really, where I see a glimpse of the father I always wished for. Last month, he asked if he could come to one of my work events. I'm part of a local theater group now, and we were putting on a small production. I hesitated at first, memories of empty seats at high school plays flooding back, but something made me say yes. The night of the performance, I peeked out from behind the curtain, scanning the audience. And there he was, sitting in the third row, looking nervous but present. After the show, he approached me with a bouquet of flowers. You were amazing, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry I missed all those years of seeing you shine. I won't lie, part of me wanted to throw the flowers back at him, to scream that it was too little, too late, but another part, a part I'm still getting to know, accepted them with a quiet, thank you. Last week, we had our toughest conversation yet. I finally told him about finding those recordings years ago, about how they shattered my trust and shaped my perception of him. He listened, really listened, without trying to defend himself or minimize my feelings. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I can't undo what I did, he said finally, but I want you to know that man in those recordings, that angry, bitter person who used his own child as a weapon, that's not who I want to be anymore. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I did the things I did and how to be better. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was something. A step. A brick in the foundation of whatever this new relationship might become. Yesterday, I got a call from my sister. Our dad had a follow-up appointment about his heart condition. The doctor said he's making good progress, but he needs to reduce stress in his life. My sister suggested we all get together for a family dinner to celebrate the good news. My immediate instinct was to say no. Family dinners still feel loaded, dangerous even. But then I thought about the man who showed up to my play, who's been showing up consistently for 6 months now. I thought about the work we've both been doing, him in therapy, me in setting and maintaining boundaries. So I said yes. We're meeting next week at a neutral restaurant. I'm nervous, excited, and terrified all at once. I don't know what to expect or how it will go. But for the first time in years, I'm allowing myself to hope. Not for some picture-perfect family reunion, but for something real. Something honest. Something that acknowledges our painful past while leaving room for a different future. As I prepare for this dinner, I find myself reflecting on forgiveness. I've realized it's not a single act, but a process, one that requires constant choice and effort from both sides. I'm not ready to say I've fully forgiven him, but I'm open to the possibility that forgiveness and healing can coexist with caution and self-protection. Update 4. It's been almost a year since my last update, and I've been hesitant to write again because life has been complicated. The monthly coffee meetings with my dad gradually evolved into dinners, then occasional weekend visits. We've been carefully rebuilding something that I'm still not sure has a name. Last Christmas, he asked if I would consider spending the holiday with him. It was the first time he'd ever extended such an invitation, and I found myself saying yes before I could overthink it. My siblings were thrilled. They've been cautiously supportive of our reconnection while respecting my boundaries. When I arrived at his house on Christmas Eve, I was struck by how much effort he'd put in. The place was decorated with lights and garlands, and there was a small tree in the corner with wrapped presents underneath. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his sweater as he showed me around. I wasn't sure what you'd like, he said, gesturing to the guest room he'd prepared. But I remembered you used to love purple. The room was painted a soft lavender, with purple accents in the bedding and curtains. It was such a small detail, something I'd mentioned offhandedly during one of our coffee meetings, but he'd remembered and acted on it. I felt that familiar tightness in my throat. Dinner was awkward at first. We both kept reaching for conversation topics that wouldn't trigger old wounds. But somewhere between the main course and dessert, he started telling stories about his childhood that I'd never heard before. Stories about his own father's harshness, about hiding in closets during drunken rages, about promises he'd made to himself as a boy that he would never be that kind of father, promises he ultimately failed to keep. I'm not telling you this to excuse what I did, he said, his voice steady but vulnerable. Just to explain that I never had the tools to be the father you deserved. I was fighting demons I didn't understand. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But that's on me, he continued. I should have gotten help. I should have tried harder. You were just a kid. After dinner, we exchanged gifts. I'd gotten him a simple watch, nothing fancy. He opened it carefully, like it was made of glass. It's perfect, he said, slipping it onto his wrist immediately. Then he handed me a small, wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant, a tiny book charm that opened to reveal miniature pages. You always had your nose in a book, he explained. Even as a little girl. I used to watch you reading and wonder what worlds you were visiting that were better than the one I'd created for you. I didn't cry then, but later that night, alone in the purple room, I did. The next morning, my siblings arrived for Christmas breakfast. There was laughter, teasing, the chaotic exchange of presents. My dad moved through it all with a quiet contentment, occasionally catching my eye across the room, as if to check that I was still okay. I was surprised to find that I was. After everyone left, we sat in comfortable silence drinking coffee. That's when he asked the question I'd been dreading. Would you ever consider forgiving me? Truly forgiving me? I took a deep breath. I think I already have, in some ways. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. And it isn't an invitation to hurt me again. He nodded slowly. I understand that. And I wouldn't expect anything else. I don't know what our relationship looks like moving forward, I admitted. I don't know if I'll ever feel about you the way daughters are supposed to feel about their fathers. Too much happened. I don't deserve that kind of relationship, he said simply. But I'm grateful for whatever you're willing to give me. 3 months later, I got a call that changed everything again. My dad had collapsed at work, not his heart this time, but a stroke. By the time I got to the hospital, he was conscious but struggling to speak. The right side of his face drooped slightly, and his right arm lay motionless on the bed. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. He was relatively young, they said, and they'd caught it early. With therapy and time, he might regain most of his function. But it would be a long road. As I sat by his bedside, watching him struggle to form words, I felt a strange reversal of our positions. Now I was the one with the power, to stay or leave, to help or withdraw, to forgive or hold grudges. I'll help you, I said finally, when the nurses had left us alone. But we're going to do this my way. He nodded, relief washing over his face. The past 6 months have been a crash course in caregiving. I've rearranged my work schedule to take him to therapy appointments 3 times a week. I've learned to decipher his slurred speech, to anticipate his needs before frustration can set in. I've seen him at his most vulnerable, confused, angry, tearful, and I've stayed anyway. My siblings help when they can, but they have families, children, lives that can't be put on hold. I don't resent them for it. In some strange way, I think this time alone with my dad was necessary, a forced intimacy that stripped away pretense and performance. Last week, during a physical therapy session, his therapist asked him to name something he was working toward, a goal beyond the immediate physical milestones. To be worthy, he said slowly, the words still difficult but clearer than they'd been months ago. Of her time. He didn't look at me when he said it, focused instead on the exercise ball he was trying to grip. But I felt the weight of those words settle over me. On the drive home, he asked me to stop at a park we used to visit when I was very young, before everything fell apart. I helped him out of the car and we walked slowly to a bench overlooking a small pond. I used to bring you here, he said, each word deliberate. You love the ducks. I nodded. I remember. You would laugh so hard when they quacked. Like it was the funniest thing you'd ever heard. I smiled despite myself. I don't remember that part. I do, he said. I remember everything. We sat in silence for a while, watching a family feed bread to the ducks. A little girl, no more than 4, squealed with delight each time a duck approached. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, that I ruined it. All of it. I turned to look at him. The man beside me was both familiar and strange, my father and yet not the father I'd grown up fearing. Age and illness had softened his edges, but so had something else. Something that looked like genuine remorse. I know, I said. And for the first time, I truly believed that he did. I don't know what happens next in our story. I don't know if we'll ever have the kind of relationship that feels whole or uncomplicated, but I'm beginning to think that's okay. Maybe some stories don't have neat endings. Maybe some relationships exist in the in-between spaces, not fully healed but no longer actively bleeding.